All right. Guys, we just witnessed one of the strangest things we've ever seen in StarCraft 2's history. A balance change happened that was completely unplanned, was never meant to go into the game, and it accidentally went through during scheduled maintenance. Now, a lot of you would have heard about this from Harstem's video, I Am Upset, where he talks about how it is an accident, it's a bug that somehow went through, hopefully it gets fixed soon, and he was lamenting the fact that he can't believe tournaments are continuing to play rather than using a mod that puts it back to the proper range. So if you haven't actually seen this clip here, I think displays in the most comical fashion what the range bug is. Basically, when you get extended thermal lance, it gives +3 rather than the intended +2 range. And you can see it looks absolutely ridiculous with how far that shoots. Now, I spoke to a bunch of people who work behind the scenes in the modding community, as well as helping to organize balance stuff through the Balance Council. And essentially what it seems like from a few people I spoke to is Blizzard has a huge infrastructure behind StarCraft 2 that used to have a big, deep team with like deep experience. All those people are now gone. There's a few people in the classic games department who are working really hard and very passionate to maintain StarCraft, but they're just newer to the project, and this is essentially a mistake slipped through where they put through some data that was never meant to be in the live game, and it was meant to be somehow in some, it was like broken data or something. I don't know, it's complex mumbo jumbo. Point being, it was a huge accident. Now in his video, Harstem is talking the whole time I think it's a really good video about how it's crazy for tournaments to keep playing on it. Everyone should use the mod. He thinks this is silly because it's putting a black mark next to pro players' names, like Max Packs and Hero, when they do win online tournaments right now and events, because people are saying, oh, it's just because of the Colossus bug. It's the only reason they won. Now, I'm totally with Harstem on all of this, but that's actually not what I want to talk about. What I'd rather talk about here is this response, which has been massive in the community. I had this response myself initially. We found out the Colossus range upgrade increases range from 9 to 10. What are your thoughts? Should we keep it? I don't feel it's that overpowered. Fancy Beautiful posted this. I said the same thing on my stream a few times. I'm like, Protoss has been having kind of a hard time, and the fact that we didn't even notice for a few days after the patch came through, I'm like, is it that bad? And there's a lot of people discussing it and arguing back and forth. Other people are saying, well, yeah, why not? Let's just keep it. And people are saying, well, yeah, keep it until they get a proper fix for Protoss. I like Harstem's video because it addresses the pro scene and what's going wrong there, but it doesn't address the current complaints in the community. There is a massive, massive perceived problem with Protoss right now. And I say perceived, but I do also agree. I believe that Protoss is a little weak right now. Don't get me wrong. StarCraft's a game of skill, and that still vastly defines and decides most games. But we are short of Protoss heroes. I say we're short of Protoss heroes. We have Hero, but Hero's not doing well. He was our one Protoss who won a GSL in recent years. Max Pax is doing pretty good, but he doesn't come to LAN, and he's still got a losing record versus like the Clems and the Rainers and the Serals. So it still feels like those guys, as the head and shoulders best Protoss players, are having a terrible time. And we've seen kind of a patch, which the last one, it feels like hurt Protoss a lot more than it actually helped them. This has been going on for a while now. I found this thread from 3 months ago, and I really feel from the last 3-4 months, it's been non-stop threads like this, not just on Reddit, on Twitter, in my Twitch chat, people talking like this. Protoss feels weak. It feels kind of sad as a Protoss fan because so often your player, it's not necessarily, I don't expect my guy to win every tournament, but it feels like they just die in too many ways. They feel too fragile. So what I really feel is missing right now, and the reason why the discussions are getting more and more vitriol, like people are shouting at each other, is because there's no community feedback. There is no, hey guys, we hear your concerns, we're working on these things. So I just want to go back here to a post from 2018. I just Googled 2018 balance patch. I think 2017, 2018 is kind of like the golden age of where Blizzard hit their peak ability to communicate with the audience, and they were still putting a lot of funding into StarCraft 2. And they would do these posts and they'd say, look, we got a balance revamp. Last year, we tried to discourage turtle play. We really wanted to make sure upgrades present non-trivial decisions. And basically what these posts were doing is they were giving a bit of insight into the balancing process and trying to let people know what their thoughts were on all the different changes. You could see that it even post these like little video animations showing the difference between the battle cruisers, the old and the new ones. They'd even show these little balance clips like this, showing the difference between the units, and they'd address the concerns. They'd also point out, they'd say things like, oh, we also know this might have an issue in this area, and we're keeping our eyes on it. And it really just made the community feel very listened to and really looked after. Now, obviously, we don't have Blizzard doing anything like this anymore, right? It's on us. You guys know about the Balance Council. If you don't, essentially, the community is the big input of balance now. The people in the Classic Games department at Blizzard are like, hey, if you guys can come to an agreement and present it to us, like if everyone can come together and organize and and get that going. And there's like a lot of pros and really deep long-term community members and stuff who all kind of get together and discuss balance and do it. The problem with this whole system is, number one, the Blizzard people aren't sharing updates on this very much. And more importantly, because it's such a slow process, you're like, well, surely the pros can talk about what's happening and at least keep the community in the loop so everyone's not losing their minds thinking, is nothing happening? Are we never going to get another balance patch? The problem is we all have to sign an NDA. I'm in the balance Discord, as is everyone else. I was looking at this Harstem video about the Colossus range, and I'm like, surely he's going to pivot in this video and start talking about balance and the concerns there, right? And he just doesn't even mention it. And I know it's kind of a topic to the side of that, but for me, it feels very related. And I was like, why are you talking about it, Harstem? Like, I was kind of like being, you know, a YouTube commenter. I was like, Harstem, when's the balance patch? I didn't actually post that, but I kind of felt like that. And he's just a pro gamer and a content creator. It's not his job. It's not Lambo's job. It's not my job to do this. But I'm seeing this vitriol come out and this stuff, and I'm like, man, no one's talking about anything. And it's really unclear what we can talk about. Basically, we're not meant to talk about anything. Problem is that leads to the community getting really toxic and crap. So I want to have a talk to all of you just to reassure you there are things happening. I'm going to be honest, I don't spend a lot of time putting much input into balance changes and stuff. I occasionally weigh in on discussion and try to foster some discussion. But let's be real, I'm just very busy, and I'm not the best at thinking up great balance changes and kind of looking through and figuring out all the circumstances. Other people can present their balance changes and I can go, oh, that's a really good idea. It could work because of this, couldn't work because of that. So when I read all this negativity in the community, I actually started feeling really negative myself until I went back and went through all of the discussion going on in our balance council group, and I was absolutely stunned. Obviously, there's a lot of issues right now, but there are so many good solutions there already and things. And I'm just like, why aren't we announcing, hey, this stuff's on the way, we're working on these great ideas? Because I went from like, man, when are we getting another balance patch? Is it even going to be this year, or are we going to have to wait for next year? Is it even going to, how are they going to even address these problems? Because it seems so complicated. To reading this discussion and these like proposed changes and different ideas, and I was like, whoa, you guys are actually so smart and on the ball with fixing this. Now, obviously, I can't tell you what any of those suggestions are in there. I can't tell you what's being discussed. But what I can do, it's not under NDA, is my own thoughts about StarCraft, which are unrelated, totally. So I just wanted to talk really quickly about what my perceived problems are with Protoss at the moment. I think Protoss is still very strong when it's strong. It's still very good when it's good. I don't think there's like a Protoss is at a 30% win rate and just sucks. I think the problem with Protoss is fragility. Basically, Protoss has moments where they're very strong, but they're contrasted by too many points where they're just too weak. So for instance, right, Protoss hit power spikes, where if you have like a few Archons and Immortals, Mass Roach can just kill it, even though those units are good versus Roaches, right? But you get to like a certain count of Immortal Archon, and the Roaches become very, very bad units against that, right? There's these fall-off points where, like, you know, Bio Ghost is just really good, and even if you get 1 or 2 disruptors, it doesn't really matter. 3 or 4 disruptors at pro level doesn't matter. You hit like 10 disruptors, and it's like, okay, Terran just can't engage into this unless they have a perfect surround. There's these weird power spikes that happen where Protoss units get super duper powerful. On the other hand, there's points where they just suck. A Colossus does so little damage to non-light units at the moment. It's great if it's hitting Marines, but if 2 Marauders catch a Colossus, they kill it just like that. It's so easy. It gets like 1 Marauder to half life or something like that. It's actually ridiculous how bad Colossus are outside of their specialty situation. Think of an Immortal, another power unit, right? The Immortal is really, really good at killing Marauders or Roaches. It sucks for Zerglings and Marines. Can just get killed by them. Archons just get obliterated by EMP. They're so good if the Terran doesn't have EMP, and then the EMP comes out and they're like, ugh, so bad. You've also got to add to this that Zealots and Stalkers aren't that great. People will talk about always the gateway unit problem, because if you make Zealots or Stalkers too good, well, you've got Blink and Charge, which are amazing abilities, and you've got Warp Gate, which means with a Warp Prism, you can just fly in, warp in 20 supply into their base. I mean, you can't have a unit, like imagine if you could just fly a medevac into a Protoss base and warp in 20 Marines. You could spend 1,000 minerals to warp 20 Marines there, right? That's so broken, right? And that's why you can't do that with Marines. But on the other hand, it means the Zealots and the Stalkers aren't as good in a frontal fight. Now, I think that's okay. I think the warp gate mechanic is interesting. I don't think we're ever going to get away from that because it's such a fundamental design change in StarCraft 2. So I do prefer focusing on those other units I talked about. Immortals, Colossus, Archons, maybe Disruptors. Just focusing on these units being so specialized. I really feel like doing something like reverting the Colossus change that made them do bonus to light, less versus armored, might actually be the way to go. Make it so it just does a flat damage versus everything like it did in the old days of Wings of Liberty. So it's more general purpose. It's not as extremely strong in one scenario and weak in another. Immortals. make sure, you know, find a way that they're somehow gonna maybe be a bit cheaper, so you're not spending 275 minerals on a unit which gets surrounded by zerglings and just killed. I'm not sure what these changes will be, but I think as long as you start to address these in creative ways, you can find a way to just make Protoss a little bit more general purpose. So it's not like, oh, I built 2 immortals, I've invested most of my money into that by the 6-minute mark. There's mass zerglings and a few hydras. The immortals are useless versus both of these units because they're not armored. In general, moving away from battery overcharge is probably a good idea, right? Trying to make it a bit more interesting. And you could see the design choices in the last patch where they said, we're going to nerf battery overcharge. And I was super against it simply because I felt it was too important to help Protoss with being so fragile. I felt like you need it. And I do think nerfing that, combined with, of course, the current maps, Protoss really struggling to control the space between them, has been a big problem in this patch. But I think in terms of like, hey, we don't want to just have Protoss camping at shield batteries. Hey, we don't want Protoss just to be good on maps where the bases are really tight together. If you can roam with Colossus and not have them get killed by a single Marauder or Immortals and stuff, and not get them surrounded by 10 Zerglings and instantly die, I don't know. There's got to be a way to improve the mobility of Protoss, essentially, and make them a little bit less of a frustrating camp, shield batteries, walls, cannons, defending. Oh, and now my army hits this power point and it just obliterates everything, right? I guess just what I want to say is basically I felt so negative after reading everything in the community. There is nothing out there to contradict that unless you're in a very small circle of StarCraft. Now, if you see what's behind the scenes happening, you would be so happy about the direction StarCraft's going in terms of the design of the balance changes. It is awesome. That's all I'm going to say. It's awesome. And the changes are so smart. Ones I never would have thought of on my own. They're great. But it's not all, you know, roses and sunshine, is it? Because when will the patch come? It always relies on Blizzard having to put it through. Blizzard obviously doesn't give a lot of resources. I do believe they're probably going to get it out before Katowice next year would be the absolute latest, because that's when they did the last balance patch. But I am hopeful that it goes out earlier. I'm hoping we get it in the next month or two, because there's a big gap before the next big Premier LAN in Atlanta, which is December 18th, I believe. So obviously there's lots of tournaments in the meantime, but I'm hoping sometime in this gap between now and then, we do get that patch. I hope you feel a little more positive after this video. Sorry I can't include more thoughts about it. Please post your own things. What do you think needs the best balance changes? What do you think, you know, you would really change? Some of you are going to say some absolutely bananas crazy ideas, but I love reading them. Some of you actually will say really good ideas, which I'll always be passing on. If I see something that I think is a genius idea, I always try to share that with the pro gamers and the Balance Council. Catch you next time. Goodbye and good night.